Hello everybody and welcome to episode 67 of the Wildlife Photography Q&A. As you can see alongside me I've got Trev. Trev, how's it going?
Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Good, thanks. Actually quite strange, empty office for a change. We've got guys traveling at the moment. Mike is up in Uganda, Andrew Beck is currently in Kgalagadi and then heading to Tswalu. Monday, Gerry is flying to Iceland, and in about just under 2 weeks I'm going to Monopools and Tswalu. Trev, you heading out?
Middle of this month to do some content down the low for Timbabati and Sabi Sands.
Good. And also it's about 3 weeks until our Mara camp opens. So lots going on, lots of traveling arrangements. Our office has been very busy. But yeah, you guys have sent through some questions. So let's get straight into it. Question 1 coming up.
So we were there last year in July.
August.
Yes, it's quite a tough one to answer, but I think, you know, the experience there is so unique, and there's so much on offer that you actually do need a wide variety. I know when we were there, I think I used a 70 to 200 most, just because the experience that we were looking for was obviously looking for and finding pangolin and aardvark, as well as the meerkat experience. So I think from that point of view, the shorter lenses are definitely much more appropriate, because you're also off the vehicle quite a bit. That sand as well, to walk through it, you don't want to be lugging massive lenses through that unnecessarily. So yeah, I would say anything between a 24 to 70, depending on how close you get to pangolin, and then a 70 to 200 for aardvark. And then, you know, there is also a lot more to the park to explore. So even something then combining it, for example, a 200 to 400. With a built-in 1.4 times converter. Pretty much then you're covered from 24 all the way to 560.
Yes.
So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, Lucas. Like Trevor said, I think you've got so many different experiences in Tswalu. So you've got the on-foot experiences with some of the rare nocturnal stuff like pangolin and aardvark, which, I mean, you don't get that in any other reserve that I know of. So something like a 70 to 200 works quite well with that. I think for the meerkats, something like a 24 to 70 or even 1635 works really well, because you can get really close to them. And then if you want to photograph something like the cheetah and possibly wild dogs in there, or the lions, then that sort of 400 range I think works quite well. 4 to 500 mil range. So I think, yeah, if we had to break it down, 70 to 200, 24 to 70, and then something equivalent to about 400 mils. If you can go fixed 400, that's great, because you can do night drives there as well. Otherwise, like 100 to 400 or 80 to 400 would be sufficient.
I think my number one lens there would be a 70 to 200.
Yeah.
Just because of the scenery as well.
Yeah.
So even when you're photographing the larger animals, you also want to showcase the area that those animals are moving in, because it's also such a different environment to what we used to photograph.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks for the question. On to the next one. Okay, Mark, so seeing as you're in Uganda, you'd probably be the best person to answer this. But I think the challenge when you're photographing in a forest, whether it be in Uganda or Rwanda or even India to a degree, is the low light. You don't get a lot of light coming into the forest, so you're often shooting in very low light conditions. And I think you need to prepare yourself from a photographic point of view for that. To have a camera that can deal with high ISOs, and then also to choose your lenses accordingly. I think something like, if you're doing gorillas, something like a 24 to 70, that's a 2.8 lens, or a 70 to 200, also 2.8 lens. I think if you're going places like maybe India, where something is a little bit further away, then you might have to look at like a 400, 2.8. You can possibly add a converter onto that. But I think you've got to be very mindful of the low light situations that you're going to be facing.
I think also, like you mentioned, the 2.8 aperture is key. Another massive problem that you faced with is your exposure.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily only if you're shooting on the ground, but if you're shooting up into the trees, you know, you've got this heavy contrast between the canopy of the forest and the light that's bursting through.
Yeah.
So that's also something just to be very, very aware of. And obviously shooting in low light, the 2.8 helps you. But it's also, you've just got to be very aware of the type of photograph you're looking for when you are shooting into those high contrast areas, like the canopy of the forests.
Yeah, I also think like quite a nice exercise would be to, because often you're going to have possible distracting elements, a lot of thick vegetation around your subject. So to try and sort of practice that maybe before you go, whether it be in your garden, or there might be sometimes when you'll have to manual focus, particularly if you're photographing gorillas and they're in that dense forest, that can often be quite challenging. But I think that those are the main challenges that you're going to face. All right, thanks, Mike. Enjoy your gander. On to the next one.
So, favorite one that I've been to has to be the Mara. Ever since I was a little kid, it's always been a place that I've wanted to visit, and having been a number of times, I think the experience is so unique that it's been different every single time that I've gone. I'm looking forward to getting back there this year. Not necessarily just from a wildlife point of view, but from a people point of view as well. I think the experience as a whole is just exceptional and mind-blowing no matter how many times you go back.
Yeah. And then a place that you haven't been to?
Place that I haven't been to, Svalbard.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous of the cold, considering Joburg's winter's just hit us and I'm freezing now. But I think that as well comes down to something completely different to anything that I've ever done.
Yeah.
The conditions, the animals, all of that, the entire experience, obviously being on the ship, it's a completely different experience to anything that I've hosted before.
Yeah.
So you talk about these, and I mean, we can go on and on about bucket list destinations that we want to go to. One of the main things I love about the thought of going to somewhere like Svalbard is the fact that it is a place that you've never been before. So when you're there and you're experiencing it, you're experiencing it for the first time. So you're getting a visual of what your guests are experiencing as well.
For sure.
Which I think, in some areas, it's not that we take it for granted, but we're fortunate that we go to the Mara, most years, apart from the last 2 years. But that you almost forget what it's like to see it through a guest's eyes, although it's still amazing to us.
Yeah.
That kind of falls away. Whereas whenever you're going to a new destination that you've never been to, whether you're hosting guests or not, you've got that excitement and you're seeing everything for the first time. And I think that's also nice for guests to see as well, because that rubs off on them as well.
For sure, 100%. I do agree with the Masai Mara, but to give us a little bit of diversity, I'm going to go Serengeti. I think it's a place that doesn't need any introduction to anyone that's followed wildlife or game reserves or national parks. I think Serengeti has got an amazing reputation, and I think for good reason. It offers incredible game viewing. And it definitely is one of my highlights each year. Unfortunately, I haven't been there for like 2 years, but hopefully next year I'll be able to get back there again. It is an incredible destination. It is very diverse, and from like pure numbers point of view, it's really hard to beat. I think bucket list destination that I'd like to go to, anything with bears. Bears is quite a big thing for me. So Alaska or Svalbard, or the spurred bears in the Great Bear Rainforest, that really appeals to me. Something I'd love to experience are those bears doing the salmon run, when they like sort of jumping up.
Yeah.
I do understand that a lot of that has been commercialized quite a bit, but that anything with bears. So polar bears, spurred bears, grizzly bears,
Black bears,
any bears anywhere. That'll be my bucket list. Jennifer, great question. I think for me, it's the overall experience and everything that comes with the wildlife photography. The getting up early in the mornings, the coffee around a campfire, the sort of laying in your tent, listening to the animals, the expectations of what might or might not happen during that day. So nothing is guaranteed, which I think is something that's quite special. Also, I think the places that it takes you, I think is something that I'm really drawn to. Whereas, travel and what's the other one?
Nature.
Why not travel on nature? I presume, like nature, you're talking about more sort of landscape kind of stuff. I think there's also a sort of certain charm to that, but it's a different sort of patience game. You get to a destination quite early and you wait for the light to play out, and but the landscape is going to be there. Whereas with wildlife, anything might happen. So for me, that's what I'm really drawn to. But having said that, when we travel, we do document the travel side of things as well. So there is a kind of a travel photography element in there. So it's not just the wildlife. I think that that's my take on it.
I feel pretty much the same. I think for me, photography, I got into it while I was a full-time guide, so based at a lodge, and the whole reason why I got into photography was for the memories behind a photograph, and I talk about it often. You can go back to, if I look at my full-time guiding career, I was so fortunate with what I was able to witness and what nature showed me, that those images all bring back incredible memories to me. And it's not to say that I don't like travel photography or anything else. I'm happy to try it. But the whole purpose why I started photography was for wildlife, and for those memories. I've done 1 or 2 weddings, which was a disaster. I'll never do again. But
deal with bridezillas all day long.
Exactly. And it's also that kind of photography. Then you're not. If I mess up, it's a mistake.
If you don't have a second go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm in the field and I overexpose an image, I can just quietly put my camera down and continue.
Yeah.
But I think, I'm happy to travel. Like you said, when we travel, we do document our travels as well, whether it be through photographs or through videos. So we do a bit of that, but wildlife photography, just because, from being a full-time guide, that's where my love for photography began.
Yeah. I think it's also quite a rewarding sort of genre of photography because, like Trevor said, you've got a split second to predict animal behavior and to capture that sort of interaction or unique behavior that you have. And you can't, if you mess it up, you can't ask the animals to go back and do it again. Whereas from a landscape point of view, you could go back the next morning or the next afternoon and try and do it again. I would say that's about it. Very rewarding, very challenging, but definitely worth the rewards that go with it.
It's a very tough question to answer because there is a lot out there. I was fortunate enough to play with on a recent trip, play with the R5 and R6 Canon mirrorless bodies, and I was blown away with that. So I think just having shot Canon most of my life, I think that would be the body I would go with. Lens, I don't know. It's a tough one.
You get to choose one.
If I had to choose one.
One lens.
Probably a fixed 300.
Mm-hmm.
Fixed 300 2.8.
Yeah. It's a good call. Camera for me is also like a very, very difficult one. I think no matter which brand, I think if you go top of the range models, so even like the 1DX3, which came out just before the mirrorless became such a big thing. I used that when we were at Sabi last year. Amazing camera. So that or any of the top mirrorless cameras, any of the Nikon, Sony's, I think that we need to get away from the certain sort of brands. I think it's a lot of people out there are very fixated on a certain specific brand and making it out to be bigger and better than what it actually is. It's still a camera. I think for the lens, I would go for 400 2.8. That'll be my go-to.
Also a good choice.
That'll be my go-to.
I think with all the technology between mirrorless and like you were talking about the 1DX Mark III and that came out, it's all more what you want out of a camera and what personally suits you. It doesn't have to necessarily be top of the range.
Yeah.
But if you feel comfortable, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about having the best of the best, but being able, especially with wildlife photography, you mentioned earlier that you've got these small windows of opportunity when you're out in the field to capture a moment or miss a moment. And that's where I would say feeling comfortable and confident in your camera comes into play. So it's not necessarily almost sorry. That sound was dodgy, sorry. So it's not necessarily having the best, but it's being familiar with the camera that you have.
Sure. I think, the new mirrorless systems definitely come with a few advantages. I love the flip-up screens that a lot of them come with now, the autofocus, the eye tracking, that kind of stuff. There definitely are advantages to that, but even the older cameras, like the 1DX Mark IIs, Mark IIIs, the Canon was a Nikon D6, D5, D6, still amazing cameras. So yeah, any of those top of the range cameras, and then 300 2.8 on Trev's side, 400 2.8 on my side. All right, next question.
One would be that I followed for a very long time would be Ross Cooper.
Yeah.
Works for Singita. I think his work is phenomenal. The way that he manages to capture animals is it's just unique. I mean, coming from, I guided in the same area as him, and just looking at the quality of his images and the way that he can capture animals in the environment is very different to a lot of other photographers that I've seen.
Yeah. I think Nick Brunt is another person whose images I like. Like a lot of his stuff is also like photoshopped, where he brings, I don't know if you guys have seen his page, but he brings in like lions and hyenas into a town environment, which like photographically it's genius how he's been able to sort of put it together. It's very different and very much conservation driven, but I love his stuff, especially from like elephants and amboseli. I think he's captured a lot of that stuff really nicely.
Yeah.
I must be honest, like I don't follow like a lot of people from a.
What I would say, one, and it's an in-house one, is Mike. Not all his work. Some of it's not great. I'm kidding. But what's inspired me about Mike is his shots that he's taken during the different seasons in Amboseli.
Yes.
So if I look at Amboseli as a destination and I look at the images that Mike's gotten over the last couple of years hosting Big Cats and Tuskers, to be honest, in my eye, there isn't anyone who's captured that place better.
Yeah.
In the different seasons. I mean, there's a number of different images that come to mind. I mean, when Tim was still alive, he had 3 bull elephants in the green season with Kilimanjaro behind.
Yeah.
It's unreal. The photos in the dust that he's taken there, also exceptional.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd have to go with Mike as well. And just the way that he's showcased Amboseli over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think, I think the whole wildlife photography thing has been so oversaturated, especially from a social media point of view, like on Instagram, you literally get flooded by it. For me personally, and this is going to sound a little bit happy clappy almost in a way, but for me, I get more inspired by, good guides, nice people, and guys that are ethical in what they do. I think there's a lot of great wildlife photographers with huge numbers, but they're not great people. They're not nice people. They're unethical. All of these things.
Yeah.
So I'm more inspired, and there's a whole list of people, but that inspires me more. The guys that they're nice people away from the wildlife photography side of things, but they're also ethical when they
100%.
when they do that. So just because someone's got big numbers on their side doesn't that necessarily mean that they're inspiration. I don't think.
No, I agree. Yeah.
I don't think. There's a lot of great landscape. I think Mark Doubleton is another guy from a landscape photography point of view. South African guy, very nice guy, great photographer. But I can't think of too many people that sort of inspire. except for the team, like we inspire each other.
Oh.
It's true though, it's true.
It is.
That's all the questions, guys. Thank you so much. We are going to be trying to do this again sort of next week. Like I said, we are starting to travel a bit now, so hopefully we can do some of these from the field. But some of us might not actually see each other for like a month or two. So it's a very strange kind of feeling, but it's also quite an exciting one. I think. You know, as we speak at the moment, our staff are in the Mara busy setting up camp.
They arrived a few days ago.
There's a lot to do, getting all the plumbing, the electricity, all of that stuff set up. So they're super eager to go. I can't wait to get back there. I think it's going to be like the best year in the Mara yet, because I think those guys are ready to go. We're super excited to head back there, and I think the guests have also been sort of contrived almost in a way for not being able to go on safari and experience these places, that I really do feel everyone's going to make the most of every single second out there.
I'm sure. You know what's going to be really strange is going back into travel the second half of this year, because you know, I remember when I started at Wild Eye, you'd be like, how's it, Johan? It's July now, I will see you at the end of October. And that's literally what it's like, and we're going to go back into that. So from now, being in the office and spending time with each other, we're going to start having separation anxiety, I think, from one another.
We'll have to FaceTime. Send each other little voice notes. Guys, that's it. Thank you so much for sending all your questions through. Like I said, we'll try and do this again next week. But if you guys have any questions, send it through to Trevor or myself. Gerry, like I mentioned, he's going to Iceland next week, so he won't be around. But we'll be here and ready to answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you so much for watching. Our emails are down at the bottom, so send the questions through there. But I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for watching. My name's Johan.
I'm Trevor.
Catch you guys next week.
Cheers.